Mark. Welcome to the Grin Gets Real podcast. I'm really excited to have you on here to dig into things beyond just the data for marketers.
Thank you for having me, Katya. Looking forward to the chat.
Same. So let's provide the audience a little bit of context of who you are and just kind of what your area of expertise is.
Sure. So, an Australian in New York, green carded this year, official, 11 years in New York.
Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not English. I get asked that every now and then. Depends where I am in the States. But yeah, I'm in the US for 11 years from Sydney. I've been around digital and advertising agencies since I was a teenager, about a decade doing websites, so user experience, information architecture, a lot of content planning and writing. And then late 20s, joined Leo Burnett in Sydney and had this hybrid role of essentially being a digital strategist part of the time and then an
Yeah.
account planner or brand strategist the rest of the time. And since then, have been trying to sort of piece together the best of those worlds, but also this
Mhm.
other world that I grew up in, which is the world of publishing. I used to publish a hip hop magazine, an underground one. So I was around like graffiti and DJing and breakdancing and rapping and all those things for a very long time. And that's obviously a very expressive culture. It's also a very competitive culture, and you can't hide in big words and jargon. So anyway, I've been trying to channel all these universes that I have existed in and put it together in a world where now I mostly teach and train companies and people about how to do all this work, how to do strategy through a company called Sweathead.
I love it. I'm really excited about it because where I really just that's very distracting, but what I really wanted to dive into was in our previous conversations, we've talked about strategists and marketers being two different roles. So I'd love for you to just kind of educate the audience a little bit when we're talking about a strategist. What is that? And what, if any, is the overlap with a quote unquote traditional marketer?
Yeah, look, I'd put strategy and strategist above marketing because you could be a
Hmm.
strategist in your life, in a game of chess, in
Yes.
sport, right? When we are talking about strategy within marketing, a lot of marketers are I was going to say strategists. They're strategic. A lot are. A lot are
Yes.
just running around making stuff for the sake of making stuff. And you see their decks, they're full of numbers and information. There's no point of view. There's no argument. There's no creativity. But a lot of marketers are very strategic. What I'm
Yeah.
largely talking about when I talk about the strategist is a role called account planner, which is just over
Hmm.
50 years old. It appeared in the UK as one of three legs of the stool in advertising. So one leg was the account management team. Their job was largely to represent the interests of the client as well
Okay.
as the business in the agency. Then you had the creative team to come up, their job was to come up with stuff. And then the account planner, the main role was really to try to understand the world, especially people. So when I'm talking about strategist, I'm really talking about account planning.
Well, I'm glad that you made that distinction because truthfully, like I view myself as a strategic marketer. So when we were initially talking about it, that the strategist, I had like a knee jerk reaction. I'm like, well, no, I can be strategic, but
Yeah.
those two things are very different. And you've written this book, Strategy is Your Words. And in that book, you dive into just kind of the framework of, I believe, account planning. So I'd love for you to share a little bit of insight about just what goes into this framework.
Yeah. So it's a long book. We nearly sold 5,000 copies. I. It's nearly sold 5,000
You
copies
just
without.
at the corner selling them.
I know. Yeah. Well, we're not on Amazon, right? So I'm a little Aussie selling 5,000 copies of a book in a foreign country through a pandemic, by the way, launched it a few months into the
Yeah.
pandemic. And so just, feel a lot of joy and love when I think about the books. Just happy to have it out. Some of it makes sense and some people even like it. Not everyone. Half of the book goes into the mindset and the psychology of a strategist. It's quite absurdist. It's a bit silly. You need to be okay with weirdness to even understand the first half of the book. The second half of the book is more practical, and it follows this framework that I came up with called the 4 points.
Okay.
Strategists in my line of work love frameworks. Uh,
Hmm.
and what this does is it tries to argue, and this is not original, a lot of people believe this, but it tries to
Yeah.
argue for strategy being a problem solving craft. Problem solving by understanding people, the consumer and culture to get to a new way, possibly a new way of seeing the brand or the product, to try to build associations in people's memories and minds to eventually sell. So the second half of the book is practical. What I just said was a bit intellectual, but it dives into techniques about how to articulate problems, how to dig into problems, how to write insights, what insights are, how insights are like ideas, how ideas can be thoughts, but not all thoughts are ideas. It just goes into the nuances
Yeah.
based on someone having spent a couple of decades working in this industry and paying a price for a lack of clear thinking, or paying a price for working with big teams, which for me was always working the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I kind of want to unpack a little bit is this idea of thoughts and ideas, because in our previous conversation as well too, we talked a lot about just kind of creativity, and I think that that feeds into really a great way to distinct what the different or distinguish, not distinct, distinguish what that difference is between ideas and thoughts, or really just dive into what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What's a thought, what's an idea, what's the difference? Because I do think that people conflate both of them. They think that that thought is this genius idea that's going to
Yeah.
revolutionize like what you do for your brand.
Yeah, so I have definitions. I think each team deserves and can do better just having a page of words that they use all the time,
Yeah.
clearly defined, and not in a dogmatic, authoritarian, mean way. Just like, generally speaking, when we use the word idea, it means this. And by the way, we have like three kinds of ideas that we tend to come up with, and here's what we mean by those kinds of ideas. So I borrow largely from a man called Edward de Bono, who published a lot.
Okay.
He's published a lot of business books, and most of them deal with critical thinking and creativity in business. He passed away last year, so rest in peace to him. And he really started to promote lateral thinking in the 1960s. And it's pretty amazing because when you
Okay.
do the creativity, the research around it, there was so much interesting stuff happening in the
Yeah.
1960s, 1970s. I don't know what happened in the 1980s. I don't know, but like 1960s,
We're
1970s.
blanking on that one.
I don't know. The world got really conservative, right? But essentially, to paraphrase him, an idea is a combination, a useful and novel combination of things that don't usually belong together. So if you're in a
Okay.
brainstorm, marketing brainstorm, and someone says, hey, we could do a stunt at South by Southwest, that's not yet an idea. That's not something that
Okay.
can exist in the world. That's a thought. The idea would need to be more specific, and it depends what you're selling. I'll make something up on the fly, which is always dangerous. If you're selling noodles and they're hilarious, it's a brand that does comedy, maybe you're like, you know what? We're going to create a range of wigs made from our noodles that people can wear and eat while they're watching a South by Southwest talk. Okay, they didn't come out too bad. That's more of an idea, and you give it a name, eat your wig or something like that. You give it a name.
Yeah.
That's an idea. Hasn't existed before. Novel and useful combination of things. The thought we could do something at South by Southwest. That's, yeah, great. It's not yet an idea, so you got to keep pushing through.
I love this school of thought because I know that as a director of community or just sitting in the marketing team, one of the things that we're always trying to foster is more collaboration and creativity. And I think that one of the things that we consistently get delivered is what you're talking about. That's not an idea, that's a thought. So what's your advice to foster more ideas versus thoughts when you're trying to live in this creative space as marketers, to find, I don't know, to really think big and find new solutions to quote unquote problems?
Well,
How can
yeah, I
I
mean,
foster more of that?
it starts by understanding what the word idea means to you and what kinds of ideas you're coming up with. Because
Okay.
not only do you need to have a point of view on the word idea, but there are social ideas, content ideas, brand ideas, UI, UX ideas, PR ideas, media ideas, comms. Like there are 20 types of ideas that get used. So what are we talking about when we say the word idea? Start there. Okay. Two is really borrowing from Edward de Bono and realizing that an idea is at least the combination of topic A plus topic B. Stick it
Okay.
together, or stick those topics together, give the idea a name and explain it in a sentence where you're trying to capture the ingredients of the idea in a very clear-headed way. right?
Okay.
So we need the definitions, and then we need to understand that we are combining things. So, we could we could think about how can we sell noodles, topic A, and then topic B could be pens, and we stick them together. I mean, I did it with topic A being noodles and topic B being wigs. I don't know why I'm introducing pens because I had one. I had one at work.
There are two very different things. I think that because they're two
Yeah,
very different things, it could
yeah,
potentially foster some ideas.
yeah. And so just understanding that it's the combination, and that combination can be random or it can come from your research. So for community managers, maybe they see certain behaviors that are interesting and unexpected, and you combine them and it leads to a thing. And the third thing is really through writing. Humans are really good at thinging things, naming behaviors,
Did you
naming
say
the.
thinging things
Yeah,
or
we
thinking
think
things?
thinging things. We thing
Okay.
things. T H I
What does
N
that
G.
mean?
Well, it's like when you see like mansplaining.
Okay. I
That's
get
an
that.
example of humans naming a thing, about, in this case, two types of behavior, giving it a name, and then we're
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, I get that. That creates a new sense of meaning. I understand my world a little bit better, right? So I think those three things.
I think when you do that, it also helps people understand it so that they don't get stuck in semantics. I think that has been honestly my theme for the week. I get stuck on semantics. So I love the idea that I love the idea. Look at me. See, now I'm using it, right?
I know,
I
but
l-
that's the
it,
danger
it,
when you
it
talk to me. You start to second guess yourself. Like it's
I know. I was like, "Oh no, I'm doing the thing. I am doing the
no,
thing right now."
it's okay.
Well, because oh, see, and now I totally lost my train of thought because I got stuck on like the idea. But what I
Semantics.
was trying to say is that we often get stuck on semantics. So I like that what you're proposing is let's have a set definition to begin with so we don't even get caught up in that because that's not where creativity
Yeah,
lives, us,
correct.
having a semantical debate. But us having this creative collaboration about like, okay, what more? I'm also just kind of looking for what are the types of, or if you even have advice for this, what are the types of questions that I can ask potentially in this kind of group setting if I'm trying to foster more of this creativity, right? And people that maybe don't think that they're creative, but I think that there's creativity in everyone. You just have to figure out how to get it out. Like, what can I ask someone so that they dive a little bit deeper? So it's not okay. Well, we should sell noodles at South by Southwest, right?
Yeah,
I can't just say, "Well, that's a thought, not an idea." Next. What I think to be creative, you
correct.
have to try to get it out of someone, right?
Yeah. Uh, so one of the roles of the account planner or the strategist in an agency is to write a creative brief that would go
Okay.
to a creative team, and the creative team would come up with ideas. I think another thing that's going on right now is there are so many strategy and creative roles in companies that aren't used to them. And so all these
Yeah.
people having to work together where they don't understand each other's language. Some people aren't
Mhm.
conceptually trained, but they're responsible for ideas. And it's just this kind of chaos out there. So if we got together and we were working on a campaign for you or for this noodle company, we understand what the word idea is. We get together for an hour. We have some stimulus, some research, right? That's
Yeah.
also a key job of an account planner or strategist is usually to do some qualitative or quantitative research. Maybe there's a creative brief, and in that brief, there could be a clearly stated problem that you're trying to solve, some kind of insight that
Mm,
helps us
I
understand the
like that.
problem differently, and then a strategy statement, right? Or a single minded proposition or a key message. And then once you've got the creative brief there, or at least those three things problem, insight, strategy statement, you can come up with ideas. And you might say, in the next 60 minutes, we want to come up with 10 ideas. But we know what an idea is. We're going to give each idea a name. We're going to explain it in a sentence. We get them all up on a wall or in the Miro, whatever you're doing, Zoom wise, breakout rooms. And that can be a really productive use of time. But if you don't know the words you're using or how ideas happen, etc., you're just going to be swirling, and every meeting is going to feel like Groundhog Day. Everyone's going to be frustrated, and so sometimes
Yeah.
you slow down and get those foundations in place first.
I think one of the most exciting things that I see and that I've seen across my career just in general is when you walk away from a really great collaboration session that makes you feel creative. It almost feels like you've just done like a CrossFit class. Like there's something very invigorating about like opening up that other side of your brain.
Yeah. So let me let me turn this into a real life exercise, okay? Because
Okay.
I've trained thousands of people, hundreds face to face, probably thousands face to face, but definitely hundreds face to face. And what I often find myself doing is getting people to slow down and stop rushing through all the information and stopping with just the obvious facts. So, why do you like those interactions where you feel creative?
I
Why do you like that?
Why do I like the interactions?
Those interactions that make you feel creative. Why? Why do you like it?
I like it because it feels good. I feel smarter in a weird way, even though it's being really creative.
Mm.
Um, I also think there's something very sad. Like to me, it's satisfying, and I don't know how to articulate like that satisfaction of it. Like I didn't even know that I had that in me. So it's like now I'm trying to go back. I like it because it's self discovery for me. Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm gaining from it.
Okay. But I didn't know I had that in me. See how simple that language is?
Yeah,
That's more of an epiphany to me. And then you bookended that sentence with longer words to sound smarter, but I didn't know I had that in me. That's really interesting to me. So that feels like something of an insight. Now, instead of rushing through the brainstorm, coming up with new ideas, etc., because we're not even playing with ideas yet, I would slow down and go,
yeah.
well, why do you think you find it satisfying when something you didn't know was inside of you pops out? Why is that satisfying to you?
Because I value growing.
Okay. Why do you value growing?
Because I'm always striving to get better.
Why are you
And
always
that's a
striving to
value
get
for
better?
me.
Yeah.
Why
Why?
am I always striving to get better? Because I always want to be the best version of myself.
Okay. Why? Give me 20 more seconds. Why?
Okay. Um, why do I always want to be the best version of myself? Well, this is going to be really raw because if I'm the best version of myself, my kids will be the best version of themselves. If I
Okay.
really, really boil that down.
Yeah. And so the language that I like the most still is I didn't know I had it in me. And I guess what you're saying is if you can find it in yourself, then you feel that you're going to be a good role model for your kids so that they should be able to find it within themselves to also be creative, to solve problems, etc. I'm bouncing between like real talk and kind of some business jargon here as well. But what I'm trying to show you is we're not even talking ideas yet, but just from like
Yeah.
an insight to me is a kind of revelation, maybe a confession. And I've interviewed thousands of people, rappers, graffiti artists, as well as people about beer and raising babies. And it's when they start to slow down and pause when I keep going, why, or why does that matter to you? Or tell me a time that mattered to you. And eventually I start to hear, especially if I've got headphones on, if I'm recording it, there can be a bit of
Yeah.
a little crack in the throat. And that's when I know that we're having a real conversation. But people aren't always comfortable doing that. So you got to create a culture in each workshop or with each team on each project where people can feel safe to be honest, to say silly things, mischievous things, etc. Right? But all I wanted to show, and it took a few minutes to do it, is sometimes you just got to slow down and not take the first answer and go, well, why does that matter? Why would that matter to you? Why would it matter to someone else? And eventually you kind of, I feel like you crack infinity and you stick your hand in and you
Yeah.
can pull a little butterfly out of infinity. You're like, oh, that's beautiful. I didn't know I had it in me. Short words, beautiful.
I didn't I know, and I don't know that I would have been able to articulate it to that. Like, it's interesting to me. You've obviously been doing this for so long that you can hear it faster than most people or sooner you see it. Because I also talk out loud, which I feel like is part of that process of like, why do I feel that? I kind of need to say the words out loud. Is that truly the thing? Like, I think so much out loud that to get to like what you heard that I didn't even realize I said is so fascinating. And my assumption then is when we're talking about, and this is full circle, when we're talking about that difference between strategists and marketers, that strategist is that person that can see that human part of it, like
Yeah.
that thing that I don't even know, that as a marketer I'm trying to solve something, but not honestly trying to solve it through ideas, where strategist seems to be trying to solve it through ideas. But I don't
Yeah.
know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, definitely, potentially. So to turn that little insight into an idea, you could call your workshops with your team from now on "Get it out of me" sessions,
I
right?
love it.
And it
Yes.
could have something to do with birthing, midwifing, I don't know, but you could find a theme, a creative, like a visual theme, and
Yeah.
structure the sessions based on, what's inside of you for 5 or 10 minutes. I don't know what that involves, and then get it out of me. So that's where the insight and the idea can connect quite closely. And I do feel, and not in an arrogant way, because being good at some of this stuff also means that you're bad at other things, or that you pay a price
Yeah.
for it. I find it very hard to turn off my mind. My mind's constantly going, what about this? What about this? What about this? I watch something on television. I'm connecting it to something from when I was 3 and something when I was 16 and a rap song from when I was 17 and an argument I had
Yeah.
recently. Like, that brain goes quickly and it tends not to slow down. So these things have a light side and a dark side as well. That can be difficult to manage for some people.
Well, you're very in tune with it, obviously, which I would think that in the position that you're in, that also helps a marketer in general. So how do you tie both of those? How do you tie those things, that creative brief? How do you deliver that to a marketer so that it is digestible? Because I imagine that where you have this overview and you're providing it to the marketer, how do they implement on something like that?
Yeah, so to be a little picky and semantic, the audience of a creative brief in an advertising agency is not a marketing team or a client. The audience of a creative
Okay.
brief is the creative team that's like a copywriter and art director. Typically, the
Okay.
marketers, like in an agency relationship, and just to
Yeah.
situate it there, the marketers will usually give the agency a marketing brief. The marketing brief's role, I feel like the main audience of a marketing brief is typically internal. It's the marketing team's internal stakeholders to unlock
Oh, for
budget.
sure.
Hopefully there's clear communication if they're working with an agency or an in-house team, but often there isn't.
Yeah.
Often it's one document trying to do 3 jobs and they become too long, too full of business jargon, and the people who need to use the input creatively are like, this is useless, but they can't say it. So I think if I could reframe your question, sorry, this is annoying strategist behavior. If I can reframe your
No,
question,
I love it. I will learn from this.
yeah, I feel like what you're saying is like, how do you share the kind of thinking that we just went through back with the marketer? Let's not worry about
Yeah.
a creative brief or the format. And I got to tell you, it's really hard. I find the US a lot more conservative. It's uh, more literal sometimes. And so if I'm working on strategy and it's a little bit out of the box, it's a bit unusual, that would be pretty mainstream in Australia, pretty mainstream in the UK. I'm not talking about being provocative, unusual for the sake of it, but
Yeah.
ideas are necessarily unusual because they haven't existed before, you know?
Yeah.
And so not all marketers are able to receive ideas. Some marketing organizations are actually quite conservative, small c conservative, and they don't get foreign objects. Okay. So it's quite
Yeah.
hard. And the thing is, if you need to do creative work and strategic
Mhm.
work and the marketers don't quite get it, then there's no use sharing it with them. You kind of need to skip over a few steps and maybe hide it from them. Or
Okay.
yeah, it's true. Or you need to find that one person in the team who gets it, because otherwise you just spin in circles and everyone burns out and then they quit. So answered a different question, but I don't know if it was useful.
No, I think that that's really helpful. I mean, if I could sum up what I'm hearing is I'm hearing that you don't articulate that. A
Okay.
creative brief is definitely for the content and the designers, and I understand that as well too. So I well, let me dive into the creative brief as well too, or maybe I can ask you some follow up questions in regards to like what's in this creative brief, right? Because, and I will continue to bring like the marketing side of it because that's my brain. But I've also managed creatives as well too, and I know what I put into their creative brief is very specific, and the marketing elements feed into it as well. And when the marketing elements that I'm talking about are the very like the buyer personas, right? who is my target audience? What's that number? What's like ultimately a creative brief should tell you like what my main objective is behind this, because
Yeah.
I assume that that goes into the content and to the design of it. But when you're
Yes.
talking about a creative brief, what are the guts?
Yeah. It's who the audience. Again, the challenge with a lot of strategy documents is they lack honesty and they're full of jargon, right? So
Yeah,
let's see if we can make something up. I don't know if this one will work out, but let's say our audience was marketers. Well,
yeah,
tell me something about them that I don't know, and if it's obvious, don't put it in the brief. Let's say, okay, we're going to talk to marketers, but we want to talk to marketers who are desperate to do creative work. This is their last shot. If they don't get this campaign through, they're leaving. Like, I want to know that stuff. I don't care about all the data points that you're going to pull in and bore me
yeah,
with. I want to know like the real honest stuff about these people, even if it's a bit dramatic, right? And I think too
yeah,
many people treat these documents like they're college essays or college assignments, filling them up with like 50 pieces of information that nobody cares about. You know, we can't bore each other with creative briefs, but obviously you want the audience, something to do with the audience in there, something short, creative, unexpected. You don't even have to write in full sentences. Could be little phrases. Marketers desperate to do creative work, last shot, might quit if doesn't get campaign idea through. You could talk like that.
yeah,
You want to understand the problem that you're trying to solve for the brand. You want to understand some numbers, like what are the things you're going to measure. It is important. I think something that's probably sacrosanct is I think some of the numbers in creative briefs are less important than people imagine.
yeah,
Typically, you want an insight, an unspoken human truth, but you want that to sound or to read more like a stand up comedian's language than business school language. You don't want cliche like mums are busy. No, 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 no. Tell me something that I haven't heard before, something that has a ton of energy that's raw, probably some kind of single minded proposition or key message. And then there's other things, stuff to do with the brand. What brand assets do we have to work with? There's probably 4 or 5 things that need to be on most creative briefs. It also depends on the philosophy of the team writing the creative brief. So, for example, agencies like TBWA, their philosophy is disruption. McCann Erickson,
yeah.
truth well told, and those sort of philosophies lead to different templates. But maybe a little bit about competition and culture, but one page, make it provocative, and if it's not interesting, delete it.
I I love how you've broken that down. And there is a reason why, I titled our conversation Marketing Beyond Data, because you've said several times already how, these numbers, yeah, they're great, but like that doesn't really tell me anything. And it actually speaks to a previous conversation I had had with someone else in regards to just kind of value graphics in general. Tell me about that person. And I love the fact that you actually just mentioned a comedian, because what a comedian is so good at is it's taking a look at the ordinary and finding like that connection that's universal that people just get. And I think from like for a creative brief, you kind of need that, because that's essentially what you're trying to emote out there, and it tells more than a breakdown of, I'm looking for the end user and they're a millennial and they care about this, which I'm sure is really helpful, but it's not as valuable as
It's
I
not
think what
helpful.
you're describing.
It's not helpful, and that's 90% of briefs, and that's what gives strategy a
Yeah.
bad name. Like, it's not. There's too much. I just think everyone's trying to sound important and special and educated as opposed to clear headed. And okay, could part of your brief exist as a tweet or as a blog post? And if it did, would it get shared? Like, w-
Yeah.
the writing of these documents needs to be compared to proper writing, not fake business school writing. Because most briefs
Yeah.
are mums are busy or millennials don't think we're cool, therefore we're going to make ourselves cool. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I love this. We could probably talk about this forever. I went completely off topic from what I told you that we were going to talk about. And we're almost to the end, which is our prediction time question. So I'd love to hear what you see just kind of changing in just the marketing world. Maybe it is incorporating more strategists, maybe it is changing that school of thought, but what do you kind of see changing over the course of like the next year or two?
Yeah, so I'm never big into big bold predictions, but I do see a slight correction. I feel like we've had at least a decade of focus on data, programmatic advertising, bottom of the funnel techniques, conversion, a
Mhm.
real disinterest in advertising to the point where a lot of people in Silicon Valley think that if you need to advertise, it's because your product sucks. That's ridiculous. That's not what the science says, right? So I
Yeah.
hope, I believe and I hope we're going to have a correction where creativity and empathy are going to matter more in business. And the reason that's going to happen is because people are going to increasingly understand, as they do in some countries, because some of this research is more mainstream, but people are going to
Mhm.
understand that creativity is a competitive advantage. Your marketing team and your agencies, they're not drawings and pictures people. They're critical thinkers capable of helping the business in substantial ways if the business knows how to use them. So, my prediction, it's really a hope, but I'll call it a prediction. My prediction is there'll be a correction in business where data and logic, people know they matter, but more critical
Mhm.
thinkers and people capable of creativity will be brought into more of the big adult parts of businesses.
No, I love that, and I'll take the hope as a prediction and vice versa. I mean, we won't get locked into semantics, but I think hope, prediction, I love it both. I really appreciate you just kind of diving into marketing and strategy and thinking beyond numbers because that to me, like I like to feel in that creative space as well too. So thank you for giving me that gift today, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. It's been an awesome chat. Thank you.